My first guest will be discussing his perspective on some of the top stories highlighted earlier. Izu Uwama is CEO and founder of Xavier. Thanks for joining me again after last week's coronation story. Great to have you back. So the first story I wanted us to cover, which I reported on earlier, was finally the launch of the much-awaited Dangote refinery, 650,000 barrels per day. How do you think this is going to impact the economic landscape in Nigeria?
I think it has to be broken down into the macro and the micro. So the macroeconomics, well, in terms of unemployment, right? 150,000 direct jobs and 250,000 associated or what you call indirect jobs. That's huge in itself, right? And there's a lot of first times. I mean, the whole of that whole free trade zone has been selling thousands of plots of land on the Dangote refinery story, right? So those are the cool, very good things. And of course, productivity and all that in terms of the GDP, increase in GDP, because there's a lot of associated product. But the most important part of the story is also all the other industries that's going to jump on it beyond just transportation and fuel, right? One of them is petrochemicals, right? So plastics, a lot of money spent on plastic importation, but one of the byproducts of all of that is also, I think, is polyethylene or so, right? Which is a major component. So that's cool. But for the microeconomics of it, we're not sure. So everyone's wish would be that the price of fuel per unit
will come down.
But we're not sure that.
Is that wishful thinking?
Yes, because market forces is what determines price per unit, right? And it's still a monopolistic market as it is right now, because it's still going to be the biggest producer or refinery. Maybe when BOA comes on board, BOA is also building, Rabiu is building his refinery in Akwa Ibom, right, which is like maybe half the capacity of Dangote. It's only when you have market forces can you bring down pricing, not when the price is lower. So
market forces, you mean by competition more absolutely. Efficiency within the supply chain and things like that?
Absolutely. And then on one hand, there's also a lot of simulation that can be done graphically. Like, what if they take out subsidy versus Dangote refining with subsidy? But the most important thing is that the 10 billion we ship out, right? $10 billion we ship out would stop in terms of transportation cost and all that, trying to bring fuel in. So that's good. Any way you want to look at it, it's a win-win for us. And I hope also the government can come in and be very detailed in terms of just putting barriers to ensure that all of the rascality of monopoly doesn't happen.
Okay.
Right? I mean, a few years ago, we were importing cement. Right now, we're producing a lot of cement, but I'm not sure there's any correlation between that and the price of cement.
The price of cement, right? Of course. Really let's hope it does actually make a positive difference, and we'll be tracking that story further on the Rise News. Now, LinkedIn said it's cutting almost 800 jobs. It's really interesting because I've come to see more and more people use that professional platform for networking and getting jobs and positioning themselves for employment opportunities. What do you think is really going on here? Okay,
so it's not a LinkedIn problem. It's a industry problem, right? The tech industry in itself, in the last 6 months, it lost 270,000 jobs, right? So it's a natural trajectory of the tech industry, right? Don't forget that the owners of LinkedIn is actually Microsoft, right? And yes. Microsoft also is a major leader in that job cut madness. I mean, a few months ago, actually, Amazon did cut down, Google, Microsoft, all of them are cutting down. So it's a general trajectory. But if you look at the real reason, when you look at the internal issues, it's the fact that consumer behavior has also changed, right? 10 years ago when LinkedIn was in their prime, right? You mentioned them among the top 10 social media platforms. They're not even on top 10 right now.
Really? So what do professionals use? Like, where else do they go?
Market dynamics is changing, right? Yeah. I can recruit a fashion designer just looking at that TikTok videos and her Snapchat videos and her Instagram videos. These days, I mean, I run a recruitment agency, and one of the funny things is I'd rather ask you for your Instagram handle before your LinkedIn handle, because that's more human focused, right? Everybody just packages on LinkedIn, right? So there's a lot of consumer behavior that we're not looking at, right? And of course, the fact that the whole tech thing, I'm not going to call it a bust, but it's almost past its prime, and it's on two ways, both employment and also in terms of raising funds. Right, so let's see how that goes in the end.
Yeah, very, very interesting to see how that goes. LinkedIn will probably need to evolve in terms of innovation. Now, Airbnb, another company that's been around for many, many years, net profit of $117 million, but still not really quite reaching analyst expectations, but still quite a thriving business model, right?
You know, there's a correlation between the Airbnb story and the LinkedIn story, right? What's it? Every business has to have like a caffeine, like when I say caffeine, like an addiction, right? I mean, what's a coffee without, or Coca-Cola without the caffeine, like the addictive substance? I don't think Airbnb's found that. Airbnb is an offshoot of what you call disruptive innovation, right? The likes of it will be Uber, Google, Wikipedia. If you look at those brands I just mentioned, you put Airbnb in that league, but you find out that Airbnb is not the one leading that race. And the reason is simple. When you're a disruptively innovative brand, right, one of the first things you want to do is to tend towards monopoly, right? So Google, for example, is probably owning so much market share compared to any other search engine. Uber is owning so much market share compared to any search engine. But Airbnb isn't even oligopolistic yet. Talk less of monopoly. The ultimate goal of every business, even though we don't want to hear it,
is to win 100% market share.
Monopoly, 100%. Yeah. Because they're competing both directly and indirectly with too many people at the same time, including the hotels still, right? I mean, there's Marriott, there's Hilton, there's all that. So that's the first fundamental problem that I think Airbnb is having until they can sort that out, right? And so it's a really C-suite conversation. The quality of the people on their board and on their leadership that gives direction to the company determines how best, right, they can evolve, but it's not looking too good. I mean, good thing is that they had and it was perfect timing. Mother Nature happened. Let's not forget, right? In
COVID.
Yes, 2020, right? 2020 would have been that year for them. 2019, 2020, 2021. But people stopped traveling in 2020, 2021. So there's a Mother Nature factor to it. Sometimes you could do all the right things and still end up in the wrong place. Nigerians would probably say the spirituality of business. Like village people were on them at that point. Indeed. But that's the real issue. But Airbnb is promising, but they have to cut costs, right, and find how they can optimize profits. Once they do that, they'll be fine. But
yeah, and of course, for a lot of tech businesses at that time, COVID had a huge hit, and many of them are still playing catch up to ramp back up to pre-COVID levels.
Yeah.
The EU is regulating AI. I mean, I talked about this with someone about 2 weeks ago. All these tech businesses will be in the eye of the storm. Do you think we risk throwing the baby out with the bathwater? Because there's been a lot of talk around the dangers of artificial intelligence, unbridled use of artificial intelligence. What are your thoughts with this development?
It's honestly a huge concern, if you ask me, and I'll tell you very directly. I heard a Jay-Z song. I'm a huge fan of Jay-Z. I heard a Jay-Z song, one of the best Jay-Z verses I've ever heard, and it wasn't even done by Jay-Z. It was totally
this is
AI.
deep fake
yes,
AI.
Deep fake AI, and those are the real issues, right? At what point do we know what's authentic and what's real? Because you can get someone to sound exactly like me and look like me, right? So these are the real issues. But the funny thing is, it's an early stage invention. And the problem with early stage invention is we haven't figured it out yet. And sadly, the practitioners are way smarter than the regulators. If you bring it back in Nigeria, it's still a struggle where you have new technology and the regulators are trying to catch up. I don't think the guys you find in the Senate and in that type of parliamentary systems in Europe have the capacity to regulate a bunch of 20, 22, 23-year-old tech guys producing product. Like I always say in Nigeria, the drug dealers, right, are one step ahead of NDLEA, and then the Yahoo boys are one step ahead of EFCC, and then the filling stations are one step of DPR and NPC. It's the nature of fast-paced, early-stage inventions. So I hope that what would happen, because we saw them trying to do that with Mark Zuckerberg when Facebook came, and everybody was like, oh, you know, the next third world war would be driven by social media, because, I mean, anyone has a right to broadcast anything. But they didn't do that perfectly well. What they did was sort of an antitrust thing, right? So I hope that the only way this can work for Europe, and even for Nigeria, right, we're probably not in that table right now, is for them to infiltrate, right, the policies with actual practitioners.
Right. So use people who've been in on the system, the way a cybersecurity regulator would bring in a former hacker on board their team.
The way FBI would get a former terrorist to sit on an anti-terrorism board.
So you need that collaboration to make it work. It'll be interesting to see how that evolves. Now, the big story, I kind of saved the best for last year. Tinubu, Nigeria's president-elect, heads to Europe to woo investors. I mean, he's getting right down to work. What do you think his priorities should be?
His priorities, first of all, would be branding, right? Everything's created twice. Branding
of him or branding of Nigeria?
Of the new government.
Of the new government.
And he's the poster boy of that new government. So everything's created twice. First mental, then physical, right? He has to mentally recreate the impression, right? You know, don't forget, a lot of people came in, were going to come in May 29 wounded, right, wishing their candidate won and all that, and the international community has been listening, right? So branding is important, and the best way to do that is not just storytelling and traveling. It's showing us that you have a great team. And so a lot of people now talk about the team in terms of politics, but we're not talking about the team in terms of economics.
Yes.
I'd want to see him travel with a Navy SEAL type of team, right?
What does that look like?
I don't want to mention it, but I wish I could. Like, I mean,
well, the types of roles these people would have.
Absolutely, like a former CBN governor who has a good PR. I mean, the likes of Sanusi Soludo. Soludo is a sitting governor. Going on as an entourage with like a sitting governor with Soludo. Let me just say Soludo case study. Does two things for you. It shows you that, oh, you're really looking at a business, because Soludo and the likes of Additional are like the poster boys for serious-mindedness. And also, it also shows that you're going across regions. Southeast always has felt in a particular way, and we all know that. So showing up in a meeting with those type of powerhouses. And then another thing he needs to do is look at certain critical sectors of the economy, right? I think railway is something that we'll give credit to Buhari. He used to carry that on, right? We want to see the trains go beyond Niger and Kano and Lagos to maybe let me say Akwa Ibom, Enugu. So we want to see more of those expansions. So whoever is this transport minister is so important. We have over 12 million cars on the road. Do we really need 12 million cars on the road, of which over 70% of them are at least 8 years old before they were bought, what you call tokumbo? So we need to have that type of commission. There has to be dredging around Cross River, right? So we can have other ports and decentralize or decongest Lagos.
Sorry to interrupt you. I mean, you sound like you should be part of his team. You've got it very detailed. But I have to ask you one thing is, what is really going to be his ask from the investment community? It
will be negotiation. Life is negotiation. And Tinubu has shown us that that's his superpower. I mean, how he got the primaries and how he won, he's a great negotiator. But here's the key thing about that. One of the fundamental things he has to do is to be able to say, what do these people really want badly? I mean, there's a lot of commissions on the table around Africa, right? Climate change and all that type of stuff. So he has to be able to give them something that is valuable. I hope it doesn't hit our morals, our morality. I mean, America has been trying to push the whole gender, the whole gay rights and all that type of thing. But there's a lot of things we can negotiate with. I think that that's a major thing. But beyond trying to get investors, the ones that are leaving, because investors are leaving.
Why are they retain them?
Yeah, why are they? Ask the question first, the root cause, because you can still get, it's not enough for you to earn new markets and lose more markets, right? So there are real issues that we have to deal with.
Yes.
Branding of Nigeria, corruption issues, power, insecurity. If you don't battle all that,
then investors,
right? Investors. So those are the real issues, and of course, ease of doing business. That's another thing.
Thank you. Very, very great insights there, Izu Uwama, CEO of Hexavia. Great to have you back on the show, and hopefully you will come back again sometime soon.